In Venezuela, the Supreme Court of Justice has requested the National Electoral Council to record the tally sheets of the polling stations corresponding to the presidential elections of July 28th. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces continue their genocidal war in Gaza, where 39,500 civilians have been killed since October 2023. In Russia, the air defense forces intercepted and destroyed 75 Ukrainian drones over 7 regions of the country and in the Sea of Azov. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, government authorities commemorate National Flag Day. The Commander-General of the Bolivarian National Guard highlighted that the flag represents the political, historical, and cultural identity of Venezuela. During the ceremony, authorities such as Interior Minister Remigio Ceballos, Comptroller General Hosnel Peraza, Minister of University Education Sandra Oblitas, and Minister of Culture Ernesto Villegas were present. 213 years ago, General Francisco de Miranda touched Venezuelan soil in La Vela de Coro and waved for the first time the tricolor flag. Also in Venezuela, the Supreme Court of Justice has requested the National Electoral Council to record the tally sheets of the polling stations corresponding to the presidential elections of July 28th. The authority emphasized that the tally sheet must be delivered within 3 days, together with the definitive totalization, the awarding certificate, and the proclamation certificate of the electoral process. Likewise, the Supreme Court emphasized that with respect to the claim made about cybernetic attack against the computer system of the highest Venezuelan electoral body, the evidence of the fact must be delivered. It should be noted that after the electoral process of last July 28th, the Venezuelan far-right ignored the results, reiterating media campaign discrediting the electoral system of the country and its transparency.
This court requests the National Electoral Council, in application of the court's broad constitutional and legal powers in the electoral litigation arena and in accordance with the provisions of the first part of Article 136 of the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, to file within 3 days of the notification of the present decision before this highest instance the following instruments related to the presidential election process of July 28, 2024, the tally sheets of all polling stations nationwide, along with definitive totalization, the awarding certificate and the proclamation certificate of the electoral process.
The head of the Venezuela Nuestra campaign command, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced the fake tally sheets forged by the far-right to claim fraud and disregard the election results. Rodriguez presented evidence of the opposition's plans for the days earlier the July 28th election, which included dismissing the official electoral results. The head further explained that the information was published on a website created by the far-right, whose domain was acquired prior to the election day, demonstrating the premeditation of the most radical far-right opposition sector. Likewise, Rodriguez assured that 9,468 alleged tally sheets of the more than 36,000 polling stations are equivalent to 30% and not 70% as they had granted.
How is it possible that the Secretary of State of what is considered the greatest global power accepts a result when they only published 9,468 tally sheets, just representing 30%, what they issued there on the web, because we visited the site, and took out their fake info counting up 9,468 tally sheets, 30%. I still call them tally sheets for didactic reasons, but those are not tally sheets, and you will see the ballot papers made by the scumbags you see there. Some of the perpetrators are John Goycochea, Lester Toledo, Carlos Vecchio. Soon it will be known and the evidence will be presented that they were from abroad, from the United States, and to invent the percentage figures of their fake tally sheets they had published.
In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro affirmed that the coup d'etat plot that the Venezuelan and international far-right intended to carry out in the country has been dismantled. During a meeting with the Women's Movement of the Homeland, the head of state thanked them for their commitment and love for the homeland. President Maduro also denounced that the groups financed by the Venezuelan and international far-right stabilize the country were neutralized. Isabel Celira Hill, leader of the state of Bolivar, was one of the victims of this violence that for years extremism has used against the people and government. President Maduro assured that all those responsible will pay for the crimes committed and asked Venezuelan women to strongly support the banners of peace.
We have to be the first to raise awareness in their homes, in their communities, because Venezuelan women take the lead in Venezuelan society, so you have to, as the great movement that you are, create the great movement of the national public opinion, so that fascists, criminals, those people who want to impose hate, revenge, and who hired thousands of criminals to attack hospitals, cutting-edge healthcare centers, schools, universities, who destroyed over 250 police centers, sabotaged subway stations, they burned down buses, municipalities, they knocked down statues of Bolivar, of José Gregorio Hernández, of the Indian Coromoto, of our commander Chavez. All those who knocked down the statues are already in jail, all of them. The Venezuelan woman must be the first to raise with that tricolor flag, to raise the flag of peace, of coexistence, of love, of life.
President Nicolas Maduro reported the dismantling of a cybernetic and criminal coup d'etat aimed at undermining the country's electoral process.
We have dismantled and prevented a cybernetic and criminal coup d'etat. These are the two characteristics: a coup d'etat that tried to stain and overshadow the electoral process, led from the United States of America. I am very pleased that the government of the United States has come out again, to take off its mask and to say that they have a new Guaidó in Venezuela. Will you accept a new Guaidó in Venezuela? This Mr. González Urrutia, who thinks and gives such an ugly opinion of the Venezuelan woman, so sexist and misogynist, fascist and racist. So I ask, will Venezuelan women accept a new Guaidó? Are we going to accept that they impose a scenario of destabilization and violence? Or are we going to fight for peace and that the Constitution and democratic institutions are respected?
Let's move on in other terms. In this context of the Venezuelan election, let's see who Edmundo González is, who he was. The former candidate of the Venezuelan far right has blood on his hands, so say Salvadoran citizens who witnessed the dark role he played when he served as the right-hand man of opposition leader Leopoldo Castillo, who in the 1980s was Venezuela's ambassador to San Salvador. Our correspondent Roberto Opresa has the testimonies from the people who witnessed that questioned chapter of the Venezuelan opposition.
In the late 70s and early 80s, in the midst of the Civil War, Leopoldo Castillo was appointed ambassador of Venezuela, a character who from the diplomatic headquarters had financed death squads that murdered thousands of Salvadorans, among them priests and 4 nuns of the Marinol order. Former guerrilla commander Nidia Diaz recalls that the conspiracy plan to torture, capture, disappear and kill opponents was planned from the Venezuelan embassy and was directed by Leopoldo Castillo,
who was later named Priest Slayer. That is how he is known, for being an agent of death and persecuting Christians in the country. I do not doubt that he may have known or linked in some way to the murder of San Romero, because later we learned that he was also involved in the murder of Marignol nuns that happened in November of 1981-82, and they also murdered many priests.
Nidia Diaz recalls that while she was a prisoner of war, 2 people from the Venezuelan embassy came to interrogate her. One of them was Castillo, whose closest collaborator was the far-right representative, Edmundo González. Veteran diplomat Ruben Zamora says that at that time the United States maintained interference operations in Latin American countries and that the Venezuelans were accomplices in several crimes, which shows that Venezuela tolerated and harbored confessed terrorists.
Just the fact that important people of the Venezuelan Christian democracy sent to help the armed forces of El Salvador, an armed force that was absolutely violating human rights, is already a crime.
Declassified CIA documents revealed that people from the Venezuelan embassy were mentioned as co-responsible for the intelligence services, authors of covert operations of the death squads, which carried out a series of massacres during Operation Centauro, financed by the United States. Edmundo Gonzalez, representative of the Venezuelan far-right, was a witness and accomplice of these barbaric acts, says former Congressional President Sigfrido Reyes.
Edmundo Gonzalez has this dark past and is directly responsible and co-author of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed against innocent and defenseless people who had risen up against a despotic regime. Edmundo Gonzalez has blood on his hands and is remembered in El Salvador as a dismal character.
For this historian, the Venezuelan ultra-right wing was used by the United States for its political ends, an interference that has been maintained for years.
The United States had its interests in containing the advance of the revolutions in the Central American countries, and Carlos Andrés Pérez wanted international prestige. That is how hunger and need came together in the Salvadoran conflict, and that is how Venezuela entered since then. And even now in El Salvador, there is a group of Venezuelans working for the government of President Bukele, linked to the right wing against Chavismo. So if you look at them, they are a kind of shadow cabinet in El Salvador, people close to the Venezuelan right wing.
In spite of the evidence and documents that have been declassified, both Castillo and Gonzalez have denied such actions by an interfering government that was acting in complicity with the destabilization plans of the United States.
Roberto Hugo Presa, teleSUR, El Salvador.
Let's now take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Colombian President Gustavo Petro announced he will make changes to the National Land Agency to gain greater autonomy and boost the agrarian reform. Petro assured so by the time he was launching Mission Antioquia, whose goal is to achieve the progress of the agrarian reform in the region. From the Zaragoza municipality, the president proposed to declare the fertile land areas as public utility districts so that the productive land be granted to farmers. The head of state described as a crime against humanity to have fertile land and not produce. Thus, the leader ensured he will seek alternatives. He further referred to those who prevent the fulfillment of unpostponable objectives.
The National Land Agency has to be fully made up of farmers' sons and daughters from all regions of Colombia, because we do not purchase more lands, because it is difficult to buy lands from the one who bids those lands. As the National Land Agency is full of followers of former presidents Uribe and Duque, so they make it difficult for us to buy lands.
Palestine-Israeli occupation forces have killed more than 39,500 civilians in the Gaza Strip since October 2023. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported that at least 31 civilians killed during the last 24 hours, while 62 others were wounded. Since the start of Israel's genocidal operation in Gaza, a total of 39,550 people have been killed and 91,280 have been injured. In addition to the dead and wounded, at least 10,000 people are missing, presumed dead under the rubble of their homes. Israel has continued its offensive in Gaza, ignoring the International Court of Justice order to halt its military offensive in Palestine in a legally binding decision. The Israeli occupation forces blocked access to a group of Palestinian communities north of occupied Ramallah city. They closed the entrances to the city of Sinjil, as well as in the neighboring villages, where they denied villagers access to their homes. Tel Aviv restricts Gazans' freedom of movement through at least 100 fixed checkpoints, mobile checkpoints, settler-only roads, and various physical obstacles. In the United Kingdom, citizens took to the streets in London to protest against Israel's genocidal operations in Palestinian territories. Hundreds took part in a demonstration organized in support of the Palestinian people and to demand a ceasefire and the entry of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. Participants raised Palestinian flags and banners denouncing the crimes committed by the Israeli occupation against the Palestinians. In this context, hundreds protested in Rotterdam, 78 kilometers from the Netherlands capital, against the Israeli regime's genocide in Gaza. Protesters raised Palestinian flags and banners with messages of support for the Palestinian people. Demonstrators demanded the international community to put pressure on Tel Aviv regime to stop the aggressions that have displaced more than 2 million Palestinians to date. And in Sweden, a large rally in support of the Palestinian people took place in the city of Uppsala, with the participation of the Arab and Islamic community, as well as Swedish activists who denounced the continuous aggressions against the Gaza Strip. Demonstrators raised Palestinian flags and chanted slogans in support of the Palestinian people and called on the international community to take measures to pressure Israel to stop the genocidal acts in the territory. We have a phone short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Phone short break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Russia, the air defense forces intercepted and destroyed 75 Ukrainian drones over 7 regions of the country and in the Sea of Azov. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that 36 drones were intercepted over the Rostov region, 8 over Kursk, 9 over Belgorod, 17 over Orel, as well as 1 each over Verosneth, the Sea of Azov, and the Krasnodar region. Defense authorities detailed that this is within the framework of operations of the Russian troops, in which they repelled an attempted massive attack by Ukrainian UAVs against facilities within the Russian Federation. The Russian provinces bordering Ukraine regularly report missile strikes, drone incursions, and other attacks from across the border. Also in Russia, President Vladimir Putin invited his Venezuelan counterpart Nicolas Maduro to attend the meeting of the BRICS group, which will be held from October 23rd to the 24th this year to find areas of multilateral cooperation. On X, Putin posted on an official statement noting that the participation of re-elected President Maduro will enrich the upcoming discussions and drive the progressive development of their bilateral relations. Furthermore, the Russian head of state asserted that the BRICS meeting will provide a constructive momentum to solve the current regional and global problems of the agendas in order to build a fair democratic system of international relations. Meanwhile, the government of Venezuela considers itself to be a reliable partner of the BRICS and expects to contribute its natural resources to its member states for bolstering common projects. In Chile, at least 3 people died and 6 were injured due to gusts and rainstorms that hit the country. Authorities say that the rains left widespread damage in much of the territory, with fires, falling trees, floods, and even the interruption of flights at the airport of Santiago de Chile. In this regard, they noted that this intense frontal system has left more than 1 million homes without power supply during the last hours. Meteorological authorities warned that wind gusts are reaching 127 kilometers per hour. And in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest has witnessed a dramatic surge in wildfires within the last month, with approximately 2,600 fires reported, marking the highest number for this month in nearly 2 decades, representing a 40% rise compared to the June 2024. The escalation of fires is largely attributed to severe drought conditions, which have been intensified by climate change and the ongoing El Niño phenomenon, leading to drier weather across the region. The situation has raised concern among environmentalists and government officials regarding the effectiveness of current firefighting resources and strategies, particularly in light of budget cuts that have affected firefighting capabilities. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.